On March 6, 1865, this photograph was taken on the south balcony of the White House. And in fact, what's interesting about this picture, Lincoln really didn't want to have it taken. He was a busy man. Mrs. Lincoln asked him if he would do it for her because a photographer, Warren, had taken a picture of Tad, their son, on his pony. And the photographer had asked her if it would be okay if Mr. Lincoln would pose for him. So Lincoln posed on the south balcony of the White House on March 6, 2 days after his second inaugural. This picture was given to me when I was 17 years old by Bert Sheldon, who was Secret Service at Franklin Roosevelt's White House. It's a very special picture because it is the very last picture taken of Lincoln alive. In 2002, I was invited to a reception at the White House. President Bush invited the commissioners and the advisors of the Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission to be present, and I was one of those invited. I stood on the spot where this photograph was taken on the south balcony of the White House. This is a picture of Lincoln's funeral in Chicago, May 2, 3, 1865. In the distance in that picture is the funeral train that has arrived. Mr. Lincoln's coffin is on that funeral car that's being conveyed through the arch. There are 36 young ladies dressed in white representing each one of the United States states at the time of his death. It is the portrayal of the funeral procession in Chicago, Illinois. Photographs of John Wilkes Booth in there, and then the funeral in Springfield. We have the gathering of people at Oak Ridge Cemetery, and the president's body is about to arrive. The crowds are on the hillside, and then the funeral appearing at the home, all decorated for Lincoln's funeral. That's May 3rd, 1865, and a delegation is out in front of Lincoln's home. Carte de visite to the right of Lincoln, 1861-64. On this shelf we begin with Secretary of War Stanton's carte de visites, pictures of the Secretary during the war, and a war order that is original in his handwriting. And then we have a funeral badge from the time of the funeral, worn by one who attended and visited the remains. We have photographs of Lincoln that were issued during the war and of Washington greeting Lincoln in heaven, supposedly. These are very rare pictures and very much from the time of the funeral. The letters from Secretary of State William H. Seward, followed by pieces of funeral music. They did not have time to produce music with notes, so they produced the verses and then put to the tune or the air of. We have paper from the room in which Lincoln died at the Peterson House, wallpaper. And then we come to the corner. We have the last copy of the last photograph ever taken of Lincoln. It was taken April 24, 1865 in New York City Hall, and one can see the face of Lincoln's body in that coffin. That was my discovery on July 20, 1952, and next to it are the notes I made at the very time I found it, in which I explained today I discovered in the Nicolay and Hay papers, and I wrote continuing an original picture of the funeral of Abraham Lincoln in New York City. It shows the face very distinctly compared to other photographs taken of the funeral and coffin. Harry E. Pratt, state historian, and I looked up a little material on it. I was going through the papers at the time, making notes of the assassination and funeral, when coming upon the letter of the one, or the man, of the son of the man who had it, and that was Secretary of War Stanton's son, Edwin Stanton, who found the photograph. So when I found the picture, it had been lost for 87 years. I found an envelope in the Nicolay Hay papers, and in that envelope I found 3 pieces of stationery and a brown photograph. These are the 3 pieces of stationery I found. The first one and the second have to do with the destruction of the plate. Stanton was ordered by Mary Lincoln through her son Robert to destroy the plate and the photograph of her dead husband. The envelope is in the middle there with the letter from Stanton's son saying he found it in his father's papers and wondered if John Nicolay would like to use it in his 10-volume set he was writing on Lincoln's life, Abraham Lincoln: A History. And Nicolay chose not to display the photograph in his book, put it in his papers, and it was in those papers I found it in 1952 when I was 14 years old, in the process of which I got a call from a man who knew Lincoln personally as a boy, which made it even a grander experience. On February 12, 1953, I received this book as a gift from Dr. Harry E. Pratt, Illinois State Historian. It was with Dr. Pratt that I had spent that day when I found the last Lincoln photograph. Later, he sent me this book as a gift in commemoration of my finding it. This is one Cooper novel taken from a set of Cooper novels in the Chenery House when the Lincolns broke up housekeeping in Springfield and they were preparing to leave for Washington, D.C. They moved to the Chenery House, a kind of hotel, a very nice hotel. Lincoln borrowed a set, one book I should say, from this set, and he never returned it. Dr. Pratt gave me as a gift another volume from the same set Lincoln borrowed his volume from, and this is James Fenimore Cooper's The Pathfinder. Lincoln never returned his volume, and I'm not going to return mine either. Judge James W. Bollinger of Davenport, Iowa, was a collector of Lincoln memorabilia, original manuscripts, and books about Lincoln. When he died, he gave his collection to the University of Iowa. I had corresponded with the judge in 1950-51 when I was 13, 14 years old, and I read about the judge's dedication of that material to the university, and I wrote a letter and said I'd like to attend the dedication if I could. I heard nothing. But I got a phone call from Clyde Walton, who's curator at the University of Iowa, asking if I'd be willing to be their guest. I went. Now, this photograph was taken of me in November 1951, on November 19th, in fact, 1951, and appeared in the Iowa City newspaper. It is a picture of me at 14, and that's exactly the boy that later found in July of 1952 the last photograph of Lincoln. I was the same age, still 14. This is the first copy of the photograph of the Lincoln funeral in New York City that was made. I asked Dr. Pratt after I had found the picture if he'd be willing to send me a copy of it. He had previously said to me moments before, "Ronald, don't say anything. Will you please keep quiet till we do the research before we release it to the country?" And I promised him I would, provided he would send me a copy of the picture. He kept his word. This is the photograph copy he sent me, and is one of the first made from that little print. However, September 14, 1952, AP released it from New York that the last photograph of Lincoln had been taken. And this picture appeared in papers across the entire United States, including Life magazine itself. So, at 14, I found a photo lost for 87 years of Abraham Lincoln.